The first time I realized my marriage had turned into a stage, it wasn't because I caught her in a lie. It was because I caught her acting. We were standing in the aisle of a grocery store on a Saturday morning, and she was laughing too loudly at something I said that wasn't funny. Her hand slid into the crook of my elbow the way it always had in the early years, the way she knew other people would clock as affectionate, and she tilted her head just enough for the woman scanning coupons nearby to see her wedding ring flash under the fluorescent lights. It was a small movement, almost nothing, but it landed in me like a cold coin dropped down a drain. She wasn't reaching for me. She was reaching for the image of us. Her name was Lauren. Mine is Caleb. We lived outside Raleigh in a neighborhood where the lawns looked like they were trimmed with scissors, and the HOA sent polite emails with sharp edges. We'd been married for 7 years, together for 10, and if you asked anyone in our orbit, we were the dependable couple. The ones who hosted friends for dinner and remembered birthdays and showed up early to parties with a bottle of wine. Lauren worked in healthcare admin for a growing clinic group, not the glamorous kind of job, but the kind that came with steady promotions and a calendar always full. I was a project manager for a construction firm, which meant I spent half my life reading schedules and chasing deadlines and trying to make sure things didn't collapse. Buildings, budgets, people's tempers. It wasn't exciting, but it was honest. And I used to believe our marriage was too. That's what made it so disorienting. There was no big fight, no dramatic shift, no obvious moment where things fell apart. It was more like living in a house where one room slowly loses heat, and you don't notice until winter sets in and you can't feel your fingers anymore. Lauren stopped asking about my day. Then she stopped listening when I answered. Then she started looking at her phone while I talked, smiling at something that had nothing to do with me. She started coming home later, always with a reason that sounded plausible because she'd rehearsed it in her head on the drive over. Staffing issue, last-minute meeting, a doctor needed something. She'd sigh like the world was so demanding, like she was sacrificing herself just to keep everything running. I'd nod and rub her shoulders and tell her I appreciated her. I meant it. I loved her. I was proud of her. That's the thing nobody tells you. Love doesn't protect you from being made a fool of. Love just makes you better at explaining away what your gut is screaming. The first crack in my story came from a debit card charge. It was for a hotel bar downtown on a Wednesday night. Not a huge amount. Not the kind of charge that screams scandal. $28 and change. 2 drinks, maybe. The thing was, Lauren had told me she was doing a late administrative training session at the clinic's satellite location in Cary. That's what she'd said when she texted at 6:30. Running late, don't wait up. And I wouldn't have noticed the charge at all if I hadn't been sitting at my laptop paying bills, half distracted, clicking through our statement the way I'd done 100 times before. It should have been nothing, but my cursor hovered over it anyway. Downtown Raleigh, a hotel I knew because my company sometimes booked rooms there for visiting contractors. I imagined Lauren at a bar with coworkers after a long day, blowing off steam, and that image almost fit. Almost. Except she never did that. She hated hotel bars. She hated paying for drinks when she could make a better one at home. She hated the whole vibe of strangers leaning too close. I asked her about it the next day like it was casual. Hey, saw a charge for the Marriott downtown. Did you have to meet someone there? She didn't miss a beat. She didn't stammer. She didn't look guilty. She frowned like she was trying to remember something she'd already decided not to remember. Oh, right, she said. The training got moved last minute. We grabbed a drink after. It was a stressful day. Her voice carried the faintest hint of annoyance, like I was interrogating her over nothing. I apologized immediately. That's how the dynamic had shifted without me realizing. I was the one who made mistakes by asking, but the charge stayed in my mind like a splinter. Not because it proved anything, but because it didn't fit her. And when something doesn't fit, you either ignore it or you start looking for what else doesn't fit. I started noticing the little things. The way she'd angle her phone away from me on the couch. The way she'd step out onto the back porch for calls even when it was humid and the mosquitoes were thick. The way she started wearing perfume again, something expensive and clean that made our bedroom smell like a department store. The way she began working out more, and not in the casual way she used to, but in the focused, almost urgent way of a person preparing for an audience. I didn't want to be suspicious. I wasn't built for it. My mind likes plans, logic, cause, and effect. Suspicion is all fog and sharp edges. It makes you feel crazy. It makes you behave in ways you don't recognize. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself she was stressed. I told myself marriages go through phases, and this was just one of them. Then one night, she fell asleep on the couch with her phone in her hand, and the screen lit up with a message preview. Can't stop thinking about last night. No sender name, just a contact initial, M. I stood there in the doorway, the hallway light behind me, and felt the air change, like pressure shifting before a storm. It wasn't just the message, it was what my body did when I saw it. My stomach dropped, my throat tightened, my palms went cold. My body knew before my brain could negotiate. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then I went upstairs, got into bed, and listened to the distant sound of the television still playing downstairs while I tried to breathe normally. The next morning, I looked at Lauren across the kitchen counter while she drank her coffee and scrolled on her phone, and I realized something that scared me more than the idea of an affair. She looked happy, not content, not calm. Happy, bright almost, like she was running on a private fuel source that had nothing to do with me. She kissed me on the cheek on her way out and said, "Love you, babe," the same way she said thank you to the cashier or good morning to the neighbor, a polite phrase and automatic gesture. That day at work, I sat in my truck during lunch and did something I'd never done before. I called a lawyer, not a dramatic divorce attorney with billboards and aggressive commercials. A quiet family law office in a brick building near downtown that had good reviews and a receptionist who sounded like she'd heard everything, but still treated every caller like a human being. I told myself I was just gathering information. I told myself it didn't mean anything. But when the attorney, a woman named Denise, asked what was going on, and I heard myself say, "I think my wife might be having an affair," it felt like stepping off a curb and realizing the street is wider than you expected. Denise didn't gasp. She didn't dramatize. She asked questions in a calm voice that made me feel both relieved and ashamed. "Do you have kids?" "No." "Do you own property together?" "Yes, the house." "Any shared accounts?" "Yes." "Any major assets?" "2 cars, retirement accounts, some investments." She explained the basics. North Carolina's laws, separation requirements, the difference between emotional suspicion and evidence, what mattered and what didn't. I listened with my heart hammering, feeling like I was being handed a map to a place I never wanted to visit. Before we hung up, she said something that stuck with me. "If you think there's infidelity, don't confront until you're ready to act. Confrontation without a plan just gives the other person time to hide things." I drove back to work with my hands tight on the wheel. Ready to act. The phrase echoed. Was I ready? I didn't know. But I knew something else. I couldn't unknow what I'd seen. I couldn't go back to the version of myself who believed the stage was real. I started keeping notes. Nothing elaborate. Dates, times, odd charges, late nights, texts that didn't match her story. I hated myself for it, but I did it anyway. At home, I stayed normal. I stayed kind. I stayed quiet. I watched Lauren with a strange duality, like I was both her husband and a stranger renting a room in the same house. Some nights she'd come home and talk at me about office drama, and I'd nod and make sympathetic noises while my mind ran through a list of questions I didn't ask. Other nights she'd be affectionate in a sudden way, hand on my chest, fingers tracing my arm, like she remembered she had a role to play. I let her. I didn't initiate. I didn't reject. I just observed, and each time she touched me, it felt less like intimacy and more like she was checking to see if the leash was still on. Then came the weekend conference. She told me 2 months in advance, which should have felt like transparency. A professional conference in Charlotte. 2 nights. She'd be on panels, networking, learning best practices, the usual corporate ladder talk. She seemed energized by it. She bought a new dress for the banquet night and asked my opinion. I told her she looked great. It was true, she did. She looked like the woman I'd married, polished and confident, except her eyes didn't hold mine the way they used to. They slid away too quickly, like she didn't want to risk seeing herself reflected. The night before she left, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside her listening to her breathe, wondering if she felt any guilt at all, wondering if she was nervous, wondering if she'd planned to be with whoever M was. I pictured her in a hotel room with someone else and felt a rage I didn't know how to hold. It wasn't explosive rage. It was the kind that makes you very still, the kind that makes you decide. That morning after she left, I logged into our cell provider account. I had access because we'd always been open with that stuff. I wasn't proud of what I did next, but I did it. I pulled call logs, text frequency. There it was, a number that appeared over and over, mostly during work hours, sometimes late at night, sometimes on weekends when she told me she was running errands. I copied it down. I stared at it until the digits blurred. Then I did the most pathetic thing imaginable. I typed the number into Google. Nothing. I tried social media search. Nothing. I tried reverse lookup sites. A name came up. Marcus P., an address in Durham. Marcus M. I sat back in my chair and felt my chest constrict. Durham wasn't far. 30 minutes. It could have been a coworker. It could have been a vendor. It could have been anything. But my body already knew. The conference in Charlotte wasn't a coincidence. It was an opportunity. I drove to Denise's office that afternoon. This time, I didn't sound like a confused husband gathering information. I sounded like a man who had crossed an invisible line. I gave her the number, the logs, the screenshots I'd taken when Lauren left her phone unattended the night before, the bank charges. Denise looked at everything and nodded slowly. She told me what my options were and what the timeline would look like. North Carolina required a period of separation before divorce. She explained what constituted separation, living separately, intent to end the marriage. It didn't necessarily mean moving out immediately if you had separate bedrooms and could prove the intent, but it was cleaner if one person left. She talked about assets, how to protect myself, how not to do anything that could be framed as harassment or retaliation. She also said something else, something that felt like a lifeline. If you can do this quietly and legally, you control the narrative by controlling the facts, not by fighting over stories. I didn't want revenge in the sense of humiliation. I didn't want to scream her name to our neighbors or expose her in some grand public way. I just wanted her out of my life without her taking pieces of it with her. I wanted to wake up without feeling like I was sharing a bed with a person who could smile while lying. I wanted to stop feeling like the stable ground under my feet was actually a thin layer of ice. So I planned. I changed my direct deposit at work. I opened a new account at a different bank and started moving money in small, unremarkable amounts so it wouldn't look like panic. I updated passwords. I took my name off shared subscriptions and set my own up. I documented everything. I even started taking pictures of the house, appliances, furniture, electronics, because Denise told me sometimes people get petty when they're caught. And that word, caught, made my stomach twist, because Lauren didn't know she'd been caught. In her mind, she was getting away with it. She was living a double life and still coming home to a husband who cooked dinner and paid bills and smiled at the neighbors. That arrogance gave me clarity. She wasn't confused. She wasn't struggling. She was choosing. On Friday night, she called from Charlotte. Her voice was light, too light, like she was calling from a party. She told me about the conference, about how the sessions were boring, but the networking was good, about how she was exhausted. I asked who she'd had dinner with. She said a few people from work. I asked their names. She named 2 women I knew. Then she said she was going to bed early. I told her I missed her. She laughed softly and said, "I miss you too, babe." And the words sounded like she'd practiced them. After we hung up, I sat in the living room in the dark and watched the security camera feed from our front door. Not because I expected anything to happen at the house, because I needed something solid to look at. A door, a frame, a clear image. I needed proof that reality still existed. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a notification from our bank, a charge at a steakhouse in Charlotte, $260. Lauren hated spending that much on dinner. She'd complain if our bill at Olive Garden was over 60. I stared at the charge until my eyes burned. There was something almost insulting about it, like she wasn't even trying to keep the lies consistent anymore. like she assumed I'd never question her because I never had. That was the moment I stopped feeling like a victim. Not because I was suddenly tough, but because I understood the power dynamic. For months, she'd been operating with all the information. She'd had her secret, her excitement, her escape hatch, while I'd been living in the dark. Now I had information too. And information, when you don't waste it on arguments, is leverage. Lauren came home Sunday afternoon, suitcase rolling behind her, cheeks slightly flushed, hair done in a way she didn't bother with for me anymore. She kissed me, quick. She hugged me, quick. She smelled like that expensive perfume and hotel soap. She told me she was tired and needed a shower. I watched her walk upstairs and felt nothing for a moment, like my emotions had shorted out. Then I felt something else, an unexpected calm. That night she fell asleep easily, like a person with no heavy conscience. I lay awake beside her, with my heart steady and my mind already in motion. Denise had told me not to confront until I was ready to act. I was ready. I didn't need one more piece of proof. I didn't need a confession. I didn't need her tears. I needed a clean break, executed in a way that protected me from her rewriting the story into something where she was the wounded heroine and I was the monster. I waited 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, Lauren's behavior got bolder. She stayed out later. She guarded her phone more. She started picking small fights about nothing, dishes, laundry, my tone of voice, like she was building a case against me in her head, like she needed to believe she was justified. I let her. I apologized when it made sense. I stayed calm. The calmer I was, the more irritated she became, because calm doesn't feed the narrative she wanted. She wanted me to be the reason she strayed. She wanted me to be inattentive, angry, cruel. If I stayed steady, then the truth would be simpler. She cheated because she wanted to. The night I decided to make my move, she told me she was going to a girls' night in Durham. She said it casually while she put on earrings in the mirror. Durham. My chest tightened, but my face stayed neutral. Who all is going? I asked. She named 2 women again. The same 2. I nodded, like it made sense. She leaned over and kissed me, and for the first time in my life, I had to fight the urge to flinch. She left at 7. I watched her taillights disappear down the street. Then I picked up my phone and called the locksmith. 2 hours later, I was standing in the foyer as he replaced the locks. The sound of the drill was loud in the quiet house. I'd packed a box with essentials earlier, documents, laptop, a few clothes, because Denise had advised me to be prepared for anything. On the kitchen table, I placed an envelope, separation papers, a short letter, and a list of what she could pick up and when through a third party. No insults, no accusations, no emotion, just facts. The kind of facts that don't give someone room to twist. When the locksmith left, I walked through the house one last time like I was taking inventory of a life I'd outgrown. Our wedding photo on the hallway wall, Lauren in a white dress, me in a suit, both of us smiling like we believed in permanence. I stared at it and felt a strange tenderness for my younger self. He had meant it. He had loved honestly. That wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was something she didn't deserve. At 10:43 p.m., my phone started ringing. Lauren, I didn't answer. A minute later, a text. What the hell is going on? Open the door. I didn't answer. Then another. Caleb, are you serious? This isn't funny. Not funny. The words made me almost laugh, not because it was amusing, but because it was revealing. She still thought she was in control of the tone. She thought this was a temporary tantrum she could negotiate. She had no idea her life had already been restructured around her absence. The doorbell camera lit up with motion. There she was, standing on the porch in a tight dress, hair perfect, mascara sharp, clutching her phone with white knuckles. Behind her, down the driveway, I saw another car's headlights for a moment, then they backed away and disappeared. Marcus, I thought. Of course he didn't come to the door with her. He'd enjoyed the secret, not the consequences. Lauren pounded on the door. Her face shifted from confusion to anger to something like panic. She looked down at the doormat like maybe the spare key would magically appear. Then she leaned toward the camera and said my name like a threat. I watched from the living room, sitting on the couch with my hands folded, heart steady, and I realized something I didn't expect. The power I felt wasn't from hurting her. It was from refusing to participate in the circus. When she finally stopped pounding, she tried calling again. Then she started texting in rapid bursts. "How could you do this to me? I'm your wife. We need to talk. This is insane. Where am I supposed to go? You can't lock me out. I'm calling the police." Denise had prepared me for that. In this state, the house was jointly owned, yes, but separation is a legal process, and the key was to handle everything through counsel and not escalate. I didn't respond to her threats. I did one thing. I forwarded the text to Denise and then turned my phone to silent. Lauren sat on the porch steps for a long time. Through the camera feed, I watched her shoulders slump. She looked smaller than she ever did inside the house. For a brief moment, I felt a sting of guilt. Not because I thought she didn't deserve consequences, but because part of me still recognized her as my wife. That part of me was stubborn, slow to accept reality. Then she stood up, wiped her face, and made a call. Her posture straightened. Her expression sharpened, the victim mask sliding into place. That's when I knew she'd go on a tour. She'd call her mother, her friends, our mutuals. She'd tell them I'd lost my mind. She'd frame herself as blindsided, abandoned, mistreated, and maybe some of them would believe her, because most people believe the person who speaks first, loudest, and with the most tears. I couldn't control what she said. I could only control what was real. And what was real was this. I had evidence, legal counsel, and a plan. The next morning, my phone was full of messages, not from Lauren, from other people, her sister, a mutual friend, someone from our neighborhood. "Are you okay? What happened? Lauren says you locked her out. Why would you do that? Can you call me?" The text had a familiar tone, the gentle pressure of social expectation. "Explain yourself. Be reasonable. Make everyone comfortable again." I didn't respond to any of them. I went to work. I did my job. I came home to a quiet house and made dinner for one. I slept in the guest room. I waited. 2 days later, Lauren showed up at Denise's office with her own attorney. Denise called me after, and her voice was calm in that way that makes you realize she's seen worse. "Lauren's claiming emotional cruelty," she said. "She's saying she felt unsafe. She's saying you were distant for months and she didn't know why. She's also denying any affair." "Of course she is," I said, and I could hear how flat my voice sounded. Denise paused. Then she said, "She's also asking for temporary support and exclusive use of the home." My stomach tightened. Exclusive use of the home meant she'd get to live there while the separation played out. It meant I'd be the one displaced. It meant she could move her narrative into my walls and repaint everything with her version of events. Denise continued, "But we have your documentation, and we're going to respond. She's already overreaching. Let her. The more she pushes, the more she exposes herself." I sat in my truck after that call and stared at the steering wheel. This was the part nobody romanticizes. Revenge stories make it sound clean. You catch them, you kick them out, you thrive. But real life is messier. Real life is lawyers and paperwork and people taking sides and nights when you wake up with your heart racing, because even though you know you're doing the right thing, you still feel like you're drowning. That night, Lauren sent me one email. It wasn't rage, it wasn't pleading, it was something colder. "Caleb, we can handle this like adults. I don't know what you think you know, but you're making a huge mistake. You're going to ruin both of our lives over a misunderstanding. Call me tonight. We can fix this. Fix this. Like our marriage was a broken appliance and we just needed to replace a part. Like her secret life in Durham was a misunderstanding." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the folder on my laptop where I'd kept everything. Screenshots, call logs, charges, dates, and I did something that felt like swallowing glass. I cross-referenced the Durham number with the clinic's directory. Lauren had access to leadership contacts, vendors, doctors. I searched Marcus P. Durham, Durham Clinic. I dug through LinkedIn, and then I found him. Marcus Phelps, regional operations consultant, worked with multiple clinic groups, including Lauren's. Photos of him in a suit, smiling at corporate events. The kind of man who looked trustworthy on paper. Married based on his profile. 2 kids. Posts about teamwork and integrity. The irony made me almost sick. I sent the information to Denise. I also sent it to a private investigator Denise recommended, because at this point, I think wasn't good enough. If Lauren was going to play victim and ask for the house, I needed facts she couldn't cry her way around. A week later, the investigator sent me a report. Hotel receipts, time-stamped photos. Lauren and Marcus together, entering a hotel in Durham on the night of her girls' night. Another set from the Charlotte conference. The two of them at the steakhouse, his hand on the small of her back as they walked in. Them laughing in the hotel bar. Them kissing in the parking garage. Clear, undeniable. Not a misunderstanding, not loneliness, a choice. I stared at the photos for a long time. Not because I needed convincing, because seeing it in crisp detail made it final in a way my imagination hadn't. It didn't just hurt, it clarified. It stripped away the last layer of denial that had been keeping me attached. Denise looked at the report and nodded once. Good, she said. Now we can move. Move! The word made my pulse pick up again. Because moving meant action, and action meant consequences, and consequences meant Lauren would stop playing pretend and start fighting. Denise drafted our response. She filed what needed to be filed. She advised me on the next steps, including something I hadn't considered until she said it. If the other man is married, do not contact his spouse directly. Let the evidence stand. If it becomes relevant legally, we'll handle it appropriately. People get emotional and make mistakes. Don't make one. I nodded, but inside I felt something sharp. Not a desire to blow up his life for sport. Something else. A sense of symmetry. He'd helped Lauren create a private world where they could play at romance while I paid the bills and kept the real world running. His life still looked intact on the surface. He still had his family photos and integrity posts. And if he was the kind of man who could do this behind his wife's back, I knew one thing with certainty. Sooner or later, he would do it again. People like that don't stop. They just get better at hiding. 2 days after Denise filed, Lauren's tone changed. She stopped emailing like an injured spouse and started emailing like a negotiator. She wanted meetings. She wanted phone calls. She wanted to come by and talk. When that didn't work, she sent a message that finally revealed what she knew. I received your attorney's accusations. This is humiliating. How dare you? If you think you can destroy me, you're wrong. Accusations, not lies, not misunderstandings. Accusations. She didn't deny it anymore. She just reframed it as me trying to destroy her, as if the only real crime here was that I'd refused to stay quietly in the dark. The hearing for temporary arrangements was scheduled quickly. Lauren wanted the house. Denise wanted to prevent that. The night before, I sat at my kitchen table in the quiet house and stared at the ceiling for a long time, feeling the weight of everything. I thought about the day in the grocery store when Lauren laughed too loudly and flashed her ring for an audience. I thought about how easily she could perform. Then I thought about myself, the way I'd performed too, playing the role of trusting husband even after my heart knew the truth, because I didn't want to face the pain. I realized then that my revenge couldn't just be legal, it had to be internal. I couldn't win by getting the house if I still carried her inside my head like a ghost. I couldn't win by exposing her if I still felt like my worth depended on what she did. The real win would be rebuilding myself into someone who didn't orbit her decisions anymore. The next morning in court, Lauren showed up looking polished and wounded in all the ways people respond to. Her hair was done, her makeup was soft, she wore a modest dress that made her look like she'd been crying. She sat beside her attorney and avoided my eyes like I was dangerous. I almost admired the performance. Almost. Denise presented the evidence calmly, not dramatically, not vindictively. She laid it out like a timeline, like a report, like a reality that didn't care how Lauren felt about it. Hotel receipts, photos, call logs, financial records. Lauren's attorney tried to object, tried to frame it as irrelevant. Denise didn't bite. She just kept going. Lauren's face changed as the evidence stacked up, not into remorse, into anger, into disbelief that her private life had become public in a room that smelled like old carpet and stale coffee. For the first time since this started, she looked at me directly, and in her eyes I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear, not fear of losing me, fear of losing control of the story. The judge ruled against her request for exclusive use of the home. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just exhaled slowly, like I'd been holding my breath underwater for months and finally reached the surface. Outside the courtroom, Lauren tried one last time to corner me. "Caleb," she hissed, stepping too close. "You're really doing this. You're going to ruin everything." I looked at her then, really looked. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd defended in my mind even after she'd betrayed me, stood in front of me with rage in her mouth and blame in her eyes. And in that moment, something loosened inside me, the final knot. I didn't answer her. I didn't argue. I just walked past her and out into the sunlight, where the parking lot felt too bright and the world felt strangely open. What I didn't know yet was that the real fallout wasn't going to come from Lauren. It was going to come from Marcus. Because a week later, when the investigator followed him again for an unrelated confirmation, he wasn't going to a hotel. He was going to a small house in Durham, a house with toys in the yard. And as he parked, a woman came out onto the porch holding a toddler on her hip, smiling like she trusted the man walking toward her. And my phone was about to ring with a number I didn't recognize. Right at the moment I thought the worst part was over.